I'll be preaching the gospel here. So I think that Jared did an excellent job earlier on in the day of outlining the SmartNIC opportunity that has, I think in Jared's terms, backed up to our loading gate in a sense, right? So I think what I'm trying to do here today is to try and give you an idea of how does this SmartNIC opportunity fit with what we've been talking about last year, the strategy that we haven't changed, which is the same strategy we have, and also, for some of you who wants to give you an idea of how is it exactly that our products work and where exactly are there, because it can be difficult to understand what it is that we do and have been doing. So I'm going to use some time as well just going through the motivation for what we do, what we've been doing up to now, and then relate that to the SmartNIC opportunity and where we're going next. So you get a good idea of that. And yeah, I encourage your questions afterwards because what we do is not simple, right? So I think that understanding it can be a challenge. I hope I can help with that. So to start at a sort of very fundamental level, I mean, the fundamental need that we are addressing and that our customers are addressing is that fundamental need that every user of the internet and networks have, which is we need our connections to be reliable and secure, right? We need to stay connected and be secure. And if you think about it, just taking out your smartphone, those are the two things that you want. You want a signal, so you can do something, and you want to make sure nobody else can see what you're doing, right? So this is just the very basic level. But I mean, there's also other users here. I mean, you know, there's groups of users, organizations, there's companies, and there's also governments, and it's exactly the same for them. So this is the environment in which we work. These are the needs of which we address and have done for the last, as we say, nearly 15 years at this point. But in that environment, there's a number of different challenges, some virtuous, that we are facing. And it's kind of like a wheel that drives the environment in which we live, and actually is the basis for our existence because it means there's constantly challenges that need to be addressed, which we are very good at addressing. So I'm going to walk through these in just in a minute to give you an idea of what we're talking about. So the first, if you look at the increasing internet dependence that we have, I mean, I think it's pretty clear, and I think we all realize this ourselves, that we're using the internet for more and more every day. This graph here is just showing mobile app year-over-year usage from 2014, but I think it still carries through to today across a number of different areas. And you can see it's everything from lifestyle and shopping all the way down to sports and games. You know, every one of them is seeing growth. So we're using the internet more and more, and we're using more time on it, especially from our phones. This is driving us to have a more sophisticated usage of these services, and services are also responding and being more sophisticated themselves, right? So now we have, you know, it's quite common for us to do online banking, right? It's quite common for us to access services, especially in Denmark, which is very digitalized. You have to use an e-box and other things. You have to engage with the government through digital means. Augmented reality is coming out, and virtual reality. These are things that we're playing with right now, but I got a great demonstration from Nokia at Mobile World Congress of how you can use augmented reality to service machines, where we're wearing glasses and you could see, you know, information on the system you were looking at through these virtual reality glasses. So there's a lot of these things that are coming online now, which are not just for fun. And smart homes and IoT, which we were talking about earlier. So we are getting more sophisticated with the way we're using it. That, of course, is causing an explosion in the volume of data. This is a graph from Cisco's VNI report, which is just looking at the total IP traffic or the internet traffic that you have per month. And the numbers are not important, but you can just see the growth is just exponential in these things. So really, there's no question that this is driving huge growth. And this has been going on for quite a long time. And what we've been seeing at a very basic level is that networks themselves are getting faster. It's the only way you can respond to having more data is you just have to build bigger pipes and pump the data through faster. And this is just showing you the Ethernet, which is the underlying protocol that the internet supports, the different speeds that have been used on that. And this is 10 megabits per second up to 1 gigabit per second, and 10 gig and 100 gig, and now we're looking at 400 gig, and it's relentless. It's just continuing and continuing, right? And there's certainly some of these hyperscale cloud operations, they would take 1 terabit per second if you could give it to them today, right? So there certainly is a relentless investment in new, faster networks. And of course, once you get faster networks and there's lower latency, then it makes more sense to move workloads to the cloud, even very sensitive workloads or very latency sensitive workloads. And this is a graph that Jared also showed earlier from Cisco's Global Cloud Index, but it just shows the number of workloads in traditional data centers versus in cloud data centers. And I mean, I think it paints a very clear picture. The workloads are moving to the cloud. So this is the virtuous circle that we see happening, because as services move to the cloud, we increase our dependency, etc., and the cycle continues. So this is what we're doing. And the challenge with all this, of course, is that you still need to stay connected and be secure with all this. So the reason why Napatech exists is that we are helping to keep up with this technology trend, the faster networks, the more volume, and the complexity and the sophistication of all these services, and trying to help people to keep ahead of that. Now, when it comes to being connected and secure, how is that done? And we had a presentation from Ron here from IBM, who would be, one of those cybersecurity applications out there, which are, there's a whole multitude of them, software applications that are out there to help secure your connections. And there's also an equal number of applications out there for what we call network management, which is basically making sure your connection is working and it's got good quality. And these are, applications. They're very use case specific. I mean, there's a whole host of different types of cybersecurity out there. There's data loss prevention, intrusion prevention, firewalls. There's a whole list of different things. And each of these companies would specialize in solving some of those particular challenges that are there. And there's a lot of them. But for many of these applications, there are actually not directly in the path of that data that's going from the user to the service, right? So it's not like there's all of these applications are like pearls on a string between you and that service. It's not the case. In many cases, they want to be doing their job on the side, without interfering with the way that you're interacting with your service. But that also raises the question, if they're not part of this data connection between the users and the services, then how do they get their information in order to do their job, right? So what they need is they need to get access to the reliable service data to ensure that users stay connected and are secure. So how does that done, right? And this is exactly what Napatech does. This is what our job is. Our job is to make sure that all these applications that do a wonderful job actually get the data about what's going on here between users and services so they can do their job for the benefit of those users. So smarter data delivery is what we call it. And what makes it smart is the ability to do that at very high speeds without losing any information, at very high granularity and accuracy, which, as I think you heard from Ron earlier, is essential for the things that they need to do, right? So that's basically what Napatech does. And I think it's important to realize that we have a role to play here, which, we have lots of customers who do the analytics, and there's lots of different types of that. We play a very important role here that they all need, and that we can be of service to all of them with a very critical point. So if you want to understand it in more, real terms, I mean, if I wanted to see where is this car, this SmartNIC that you saw going around earlier, where is it? Where would you find it in the network? Well, basically, if you look at a typical data center, you'll have a large building with racks of servers, many up to hundreds of thousands of servers inside in these very large locations. So this is what it looks like, and if you look at the actual rack itself, there's a number of servers that are installed on that rack. And these servers are no different to the PC you have at home. It's just another form factor on there. So if you look at cybersecurity software and network management software, they will be installed in some of these servers in the actual data center. And inside in those servers, you'll find Napatech smarter data delivery technology, like the SmartNIC, for example, and cybersecurity software, right, or network management software. And you'll find it in these servers which are dedicated to that task. And that bundling of Napatech smarter data delivery and cybersecurity software together in a server is what's called an appliance. And what you'd find is many of our customers would put their own branding on there, and they'll put their own logos and whatever, but it's basically a server like all the others inside there. So this is what it looks like in there. And our job in that context is to get the data that's going to every other server into this cybersecurity software so it can do its job, right? So that's what it is. Now, to put the SmartNIC opportunity into context and what Jared was talking about earlier, what we're finding is, as we've been working through our strategy and implementing some of the things we talked about last year, is that we're seeing more and more applications for what we're doing. And this is the SmartNIC applications we were talking about earlier. So now that, rather than just looking at cybersecurity software and network management, we're starting to see other applications where we can be relevant and we can use the same technology, which will bring us into even more of those servers in the data center. So some of the things we've been working with in the virtualization initiative that we have, like virtual switch acceleration. Virtual switch acceleration would require that our SmartNIC is installed in all the servers that are in that virtual switch domain. Compression that we were doing with Nokia. Another area where you will need in certain of these servers the ability to compress files and store them in a very efficient manner. Encryption. 60 to 70% of traffic today is actually encrypted. So if you need to look at that data, you have to decrypt it first, which is actually a very demanding activity. So the ability to offload that is highly valuable. Because really, inside in these servers here, you don't want to be using valuable CPU resources moving data around or performing data processing functions, because the CPUs are supposed to be hosting functions. They're supposed to be hosting web applications. So the data should be handled with as low cost as possible. So this is why people are looking at SmartNICs and FPGAs as a way to do that, right? So this is where the SmartNIC opportunity comes in and relates to where we've been coming from. So to kind of look at this in a bit more and see what is that opportunity and how it relates to what we've been doing as part of the strategy. I mean, really, it's what the driver is the fact that a lot of services are moving to the cloud. That's really what's pushing this cycle along now, right? So we're seeing this happening. And we believe moving to the cloud for all the different companies that we're engaged with, and I think Jared could get a good overview of that. It's not just cloud and data centers, but it's also ordinary enterprises, it's banks, it's carriers in the telecom space, it's a whole range, and even the governments. They're going to be adopting some of the same technologies, and they're all moving their applications to the cloud. So this is going to be driving even increased internet dependency, growth, and investment over the next while. So this is the really big opportunity that we have. So if we look at that, I think it's important, and pardon me if I'm telling you something you already know, but I think it's good to get a grounding as to what we're talking about when we talk about the cloud, because many people use this term and maybe we're not all on the same page as what we mean by that. So I just wanted to give a very brief overview of the kind of spectrum that we're looking at here. So if you wanted to ask what a cloud is, I mean, in very, very simple terms, it's just getting someone else to run your software for you rather than having installed on a server in your environment. Right? So traditionally, in a traditional data center, what you would do is, and I mean, we say data center, that could be a room at the back of your offices, right? I mean, basically, you would buy the servers, you would buy the software, you would install the software, you would run the software, and you would maintain the software. So there'd be an IT guy or an IT group who'd be looking after that for you. That's what you would do in the past, right? So think about your Microsoft Exchange, right? You would have Microsoft Exchange installed on a server, and that would be servicing all your email clients inside in your organization. That would be typical, right? And you need an IT guy to run it. What happens when you move to the cloud is, and let's take private cloud as a first example, is that you say, okay, I don't want to have it in my own office now. I don't have the space, so I'm going to actually get another facility to host what I'm doing. So instead of me installing my server here, I'm getting a server that's in a company like Equinix, Digital Realty, or one of these other co-location type of companies. And it'll be a private cloud in the sense that it's still my software, which I'm buying and I'm running and maybe even maintaining, but it's not in my building, it's in another building. They're looking after it. And I can go visit, and it's private, no one else can use it. I may even have physical security around it, but that's kind of the first step of me going into the cloud. It's my private cloud. It's only for me. The other extreme is the public cloud, where you're using Amazon Web Services or Dropbox or Salesforce.com or something like that, where you don't own the software, you're just subscribing to it or you're leasing it. You don't own the server, you're not maintaining it. It's just something that you access through a browser, right? So that's the other extreme. That would be the public cloud in a sense. And there, of course, you're sharing the resources with everybody else, right? What we're seeing here is that most people are somewhere in the middle when it comes to their workloads. Many people would have, use Microsoft 365 or Google Docs and they will be a public cloud. But at the same time, there'll be applications within their organization which will say, no, I want to keep that in my traditional data center because it's very critical, or I need to use a private cloud because I want to make sure nobody else can get at it. So what you're seeing then is kind of this hybrid cloud where there's a combination of both. And that makes a lot of sense. So what you're going to see here going forward is that it's not going to be a step change where everyone closes the traditional data center and moves to a public cloud. What you see is going to be companies making a transition. Some will be born cloud native, like Netflix, which runs all the stuff on Amazon Web Services and doesn't own anything in that regard. But most companies will be on some sort of spectrum in between these two extremes, and they'll have different workloads which they will have on those different extremes. And that's a reality that we all have to face, Napatech and our customers have to face. And just to give you an idea of that, I mean, this is what's been driving the strategy that you saw last year. We could already see this happening when we formulated the strategy during 2015 and 16. I mean, basically what we're seeing is that our customers traditionally would have been delivering into this space here or this space with an appliance solution. Basically, here is my box. Everything is packaged in. Its performance is second to none, etc. It's tuned. It's optimized. That would be perfect for these kind of situations because that's a box-type architecture. Here's my server. Here's this box. Plug them together. Now it works, right? So we would have had our smarter data, real-time data delivery solutions, our accelerators, our packet capture cards. These would basically be servicing that space in that kind of model I showed earlier, where you'd have a server with the accelerator and the software in the server in the data center. That would be the traditional model here. But what we were seeing was that a couple of things happening. First, that we were starting to see that our customers were having a harder time keeping up with some of the speeds, and we saw the first disaggregation of the software from the hardware, which led to our smarter on-demand data delivery solutions, our network recorders. And then we finally saw that our customers had to move into the cloud because they needed network management and security applications in the cloud, and that meant that they had to have a different model, which was a virtualized model, and we had to come up with virtualized solutions that could help them to get the same performance in virtual environments as they were getting in these environments. So the challenge for our customers was to migrate their network management and cybersecurity solutions to the cloud along the spectrum and still have that portfolio that met all these different needs, and that was the driver of our strategy that we presented last year. Now, to put that into context and look at it in a smart NIC point of view, all of those solutions that we were just described and all the things we described last year can be thought of in a smart NIC context. And that's kind of the interesting thing that Jarvis brought up, in the sense that when we rethink this and we start to apply these ways of looking at it, we find that our strategy is actually positioning us very well to take advantage of this smart NIC opportunity. So as I said, I mean, previously we would have had these real-time data delivery solutions, which were very appliance-focused and box-focused. But this is a smart NIC solution. We call them accelerators, but it's actually a smart NIC solution. And we've been a leader in that space for nearly 15 years. But the network recorder that we have is actually taking the first step of enabling our customers and others to actually take the first steps towards the cloud. So in this case here, the software that we're accelerating or helping is no longer on the same box, but it can be on a different box, right? It could be on a different server. So now you have network management software that's accessing our recorded data, where we've recorded everything to disk, through a REST API interface, right? So that's a very valuable thing. So now we don't need to have it on the same server. It can be in a totally different geographic location. Ooh, okay. And then, that it could equally be in a cloud. It could be in a virtual machine, right? So it can use the same mechanism from a data center, a cloud data center, actually access the same data. And if you look at it from the virtualization's perspective, where we've gone in and done things like accelerating the virtual switch inside in NFV infrastructures, now we're not even confined to the management and cybersecurity software. Now we can actually bring that same benefit to any virtual function that runs on that virtual switch. So this is also what Jared was talking about, in the sense that we are actually expanding now where we're bringing value to applications. We're certainly bringing value to our traditional core customers in the network management and cybersecurity space, but we're extending that even further now into applications which were not necessarily related to these. So this is the smart NIC opportunity, and every one of these solutions can be thought of as a smart NIC solution. And I think I'm running out of time here, but I'll just go quickly through our different products today and see how they relate to this smart NIC concept. So if you look at our accelerators that we would have presented to you last year. They're packet capture cards. They're traditionally used in appliances. But this is a smart NIC solution. I don't think that's difficult to see. It's a card with an FPGA on it. It's very specialized for that application, but it is a smart NIC solution for smarter real-time data delivery and is broadly used, right? So that's one example. And I think the best example of lately of what we've done there is our work together with NTOP in addressing Yahoo, in that case there, that you've heard about before, where we've helped them to be able to do what they do, a security solution at 100 gig, right? So this is a very good example of that kind of technology being used in a new context. If we look at our Napatech recorder, it can be difficult sometimes to think, is this really a smart NIC solution? But it is, because at the heart of it, we still have that accelerator card, which is a smart NIC. And what we've done is we've made an application engine software, which is capturing data to disk at very reliably and at very high speeds, as you would have seen previously in Jared's example. So it's providing all that in the form factor of a server. But what you would also have seen is we have the ability to disaggregate that and offer it as software plus a card, or in any way that makes sense for the customer. And you'll see more of that from us going forward, where we start disaggregating the things we do so we fit better with what the customer needs to do. So this is absolutely a smart NIC solution as well, just more packaged and with more value on top. And Facebook is a good example of what we've done there with them, where we've brought some real value to what they're trying to do. And then finally, of course, the virtualization would probably be the ultimate example of the smart NIC, where we've over the last year, we've been engaged with telecom carriers and NFV infrastructure vendors, and we've helped, we've verified, and we've got some very good projects moving on forward on virtual switch acceleration, which is helping to make sure that the NFV infrastructure itself is as efficient as possible. But we've also, got into things like hardware acceleration, offloads, compression, encryption, some of these other things that you can do. And of course, helping our customers who are in the virtual probe and appliance space do virtual monitoring in a very efficient way as well. So this is quite exciting, and we're starting to see interest from that, not just from telecom now, but also in the cloud space, where they can see benefits of taking the NFV type of technology and start using it in cloud environments and in data centers for more dynamic connectivity. So this is progressing extremely well. And the Nokia example is probably the latest example of what we're doing there, and we actually show this at Mobile World Congress, where I think the really interesting thing there is it's an offload of a function that normally, compressing a file at 40 gigabits per second would normally take an entire server to do if you did it in software, and now we're just doing it with one CPU core. So that's what I wanted to present today. I hope it gave you a better idea of the kind of technology we have, where we fit, what we do, but also how it relates to smart NIC and the opportunity, and how you can start to look at the strategy that we presented last year in the context of smart NIC, and see it's not a new strategy, but actually it's just a new way of looking at what we were doing. Thank you.
Right. We'll allow one question now, and then if there are more questions to Danjo, we'll take them at the end, where we have a few more minutes. So, please.
Thanks. Håvard for Carnegie. 2 questions, if I may. Short ones, though. You're seeing this great opportunity for offloading CPU tasks into the NIC. Can you relate that to GPU computing, which is trying to do the same thing, and how you're positioned towards that? And the second question, a short one. Do you really think you can achieve great scale and low cost using FPGAs in the future?
Yeah, 2 very good questions. So the first one, I think, relates back to a slide that Jared presented earlier, where he looked at all the different types of technologies that are trying to position themselves in the smart NIC space, and GPUs would be one of them. So that's another way to offload. I think what people are liking about the FPGA approach, though, is that it's got a lot more flexibility in what you can do with that, because basically with the FPGA, you can redefine everything. You know, everything on that is defined, the interfaces, the logic, you can do pretty much anything on an FPGA, which is why it was very attractive for Microsoft Azure and others to use it in their environment. And certainly they've been able to show that you get just as good performance with these as you would with any other type of offload. So there will be competing technologies looking for this space, but I think from a flexibility point of view and from the openness of it, I mean, because you've got some very big players here with very well understood tools that you can use for this. And we may not have done a lot with OpenCL or P4 yet, but I mean, we're well aware of those technologies, and that's progressing. So I think there's great communities that are establishing around this as well. So yeah, we're not going to be the only ones out there with a SmartNIC, but I think we've got a very good position to win in this space. And the second question, again, was on...
That was more on FPGAs in general versus ASICs, for example. I mean, for achieving truly high scale and really
yes,
cost.
a very good question again. So what we're finding is that if you look at ASICs and ASSPs or any of these kind of chips, the cycles for those are extremely long. There's no question that if you can have a very stable feature set, then building an ASIC would provide the cheapest platform. You would need volume for that, and you would need to have a lot of consensus about the actual feature set. I think what we've been experiencing over the last few years is that the rate of change and innovation and new ideas, new protocols, new features that you need to support is just outpacing that kind of cycle. So only for the most basic, sort of well-understood layers can you do that sort of thing. Otherwise, it's going to get extremely expensive because it can cost, well over $150 million to really do an ASIC at volume. Now, the fair question with the FPGAs, traditionally they have been more niche applications, but the thing is here that we do have companies like Microsoft Azure and others. We have Intel buying Altera, which will definitely help in trying to get better economies of scale on there. But the work that we've done together with our partners, and we work with both Altera and Xilinx on this, we can see that it is possible in volume to get into cost ranges which make sense. And we've been out testing the market on this. I mean, the engagement we've had over the last year, we've tested the market on pricing levels and what can be done, and we've confirmed that we're in the ballpark of where they need to be when these volumes occur. So we're not concerned about that.
Thank you.
Danjo, thank you.
Welcome.